wanted to, first of all, tonight, tell you about a woman called Betty Jane Sills. She was someone who I interviewed along with a colleague at the end of 2024. And the reason why we interviewed her was that she was a former professional ballet dancer. She used to be with a company called the New York City Ballet, and I'm not sure if we have any ballet fans in here. You might know that company if you are a ballet fan. If you're not, don't worry, I'll explain later. But she had a bit of a story to tell. So we travelled to New York to interview her and a group of other dancers as well. And we travelled to her home. And I want to kind of paint a picture because it's going to illustrate a lot of what I want to speak about today. When we arrived, we were confronted with someone who was like your nan. She was lovely, she was warm, she was kind, but she also had a little bit of an edge that you get when you meet people who have excelled in their field, particularly athletes. I'd say ballet dancers are a kind of athlete. She had a bit of an edge, but she was lovely. She offered us cookies when we arrived. We were interviewing her in her home. She made a proper fuss of us. It was like meeting an old relative. And when we sat down, we sat in a room that was full of old photographs of her dancing, literally covering the walls, all over. It was like entering a photo album, literally entering her mind. And she'd been a dancer throughout the 1970s with New York City Ballet. And as the interview unfolded, it became quite clear that she had a certain way of remembering things. She wasn't just, how do I put it? She wasn't just recounting things that happened. She was saying things with the air of someone who was grateful that these things had happened to her, rather than that she had done them. She would talk about dancers she was involved with that were, watched by thousands and thousands of people, like recorded for the history books. I'm talking like the pinnacle, the absolute pinnacle of ballet. And she would talk about it as if she was just the winner of a prize, like she'd been, picked out of a hat and put on stage. She was very grateful. That was the word I remember writing down during the interview. She was very grateful. And my colleague, who was presenting the podcast that this was for, called Nikki Anderson, she's a brilliant interviewer. And she was, I guess, kind of bringing things out of her as we went on. It was clear that things changed for the kind of 2 hours we spent with her. By the end, she wasn't speaking about gratefulness. She wasn't speaking about, how lucky she was. Instead, she was speaking about what she'd actually deserved. And I'd asked her a question right at the end, because a lot of what had happened to her was kind of unfair, to be honest. Because she'd been kicked out of New York City Ballet after 10 years with the company. There or thereabouts, 10 years. She'd been kicked out because she couldn't control her weight. That wasn't something she had any control over at all, though. Like, as I'm sure many of us experience day to day, we have fluctuations, genetically, to do with mood, whatever. Ballet dancers are no exception to that, except the standards that they have to meet are a lot higher. A lot higher. And so, after discussions had been had with her, help had not necessarily been offered, she was let go. And she wasn't even let go by her ballet master, a man called George Balanchine. She was let go by the secretary. She wasn't even given the grace of being spoken to by her boss. And I think if any of us were getting fired from a job, we would expect at least that courtesy. And then, once she'd been asked to leave, she had to coach her understudy for the role that they were taking from her. Again, if you got fired from a job and then told, actually, could you just, show the person who's replacing you how to do all this for a couple of weeks? I'm not sure any of us would be that happy about it. Anyway, I don't go too deep into her story. I think you've got the gist of it. Back in the room, I asked her this question. I said, Betty Jane, do you not think, you needed someone to ask you just how you were doing throughout this? Throughout the weight trouble, throughout the stresses of being a professional ballet dancer? It sounds like you just deserved someone to say, hey, it's okay. She'd never been asked that question before, she said. At the end of the interview, she, in fact, was crying because the questions we had asked her, she had not really ever been confronted with before. So despite being part of the greatest ballet company in the world, she had never been asked, really, if she was okay. And at last, she could give that answer. She had a space to say what she felt. And yes, she did think she deserved better. So, what BJ said was far more important than we really realised in that moment, actually. You have this thing where you come out of interviews or you come out of recordings, I find, and you have a bit of a buzz, you have a high, you're like, oh my God, what we've got on tape there is absolute gold. It's incredible, it's raw, it's honest. And this was definitely one of those moments. I remember travelling back into New York, back to Central Park Station, the station that's in Madagascar, that one. Travelling back to there, and me and my colleague Nikki were buzzing. But as I say, there was something that happened there that was more important than really we knew. In the days that followed, we interviewed a load of dancers, a dozen, I think in total in the end, over about a 10-day period. All of them had a connection to New York City Ballet. And there was a pattern that emerged. All of them, no matter what had happened, or the difficult things they'd had to go through, or, the things the company had even done that might have been held up for public scrutiny, they would often explain it away and say, well, that's just how it was. That's just how ballet works. That's just how the company works. At the end of the day, we're one of the greatest artistic institutions in the world, under an absolute genius. I wasn't going to complain. That's just how it was. That's what they'd say. And you can get it, that's their truth. And that's what the show really was all about, was understanding what these people's truths actually were. But it also made me really think a bit more about how people behave in these elite environments. Dancers need to be picked, of course. It's like being an actor. You need to be picked for the role. So if you complain, if you rock the boat, you're obviously going to jeopardize that a little bit. And also, elite athletes, they need to be single-minded. They're just focusing on performance, on outcome, right? That's what any athlete will say in every interview. And again, ballet dancers are like athletes. So, I get it. They'll tell themselves these truths until they believe them, right? Of this is how it is, it's fine. But what we were seeing was a bit more extreme than that. It was almost a herd mentality of believing things were a certain way and not, I suppose, refusing to see the other side. Refusing to see how things could have been different, how people may have deserved better, like Betty Jane, sorry. So Betty Jane really was the exception rather than the rule, until we spoke to one other woman a woman called Wilhelmina Frankfurt. And I'm not going to go into her story in detail because parts of it are quite traumatic, and you can look her up if you'd like. But she was similar to Betty Jane. She spoke with bravery, she spoke with honesty, and she shared things about her experience that tried to break the pattern that we noticed, I suppose, tried to break that cycle of just acceptance, accepting the way things are. And the importance of that wasn't just confined to Wilhelmina or confined to Betty Jane. It was for other dancers, right? Because this documentary we made was about ballet, it was about the New York City Ballet. And it ended up getting listened to by hundreds of thousands of people. A lot of them involved in the ballet world. And for them, they could see from these interviews, they could understand, maybe in their own lives, their own situations, that they also deserved better, that they could, start to interrogate whatever situation they're in, whatever their surroundings are. The reason why that's important is because ballet for years has struggled with this kind of toxicity, right? Not just about weight, not just about body image, but about lots and lots of things. So it's important that you question things and you think about whatever institution you're a part of, how is it run? We got a lot of messages once the series was released, telling us about the impact it had and how important the work was, and that really meant a lot. Nikki herself received a lot of these messages. She was involved in the ballet world in her kind of teenage years, and they came from all over, like Western Ireland, Australia, everywhere. And if the numbers are to be believed, 7 people in Madagascar heard that interview, 5 people in Tajikistan, and 2 people in the Faroe Islands. A bit disappointing, to be fair, Faroe Islands, but anyway. The point is, these interviews had reached far beyond the kind of room we recorded them in, far beyond the impact we felt they had in the immediate aftermath of that interview. They had an impact on a lot of people's lives. And that's not to blow our own trumpets at all. That's just to credit the people who had spoken with such bravery, with such honesty. And the reason why I wanted to use that as an example, really, the foundation of what I wanted to share today, is that we're bombarded by content all the time, right? I'm sure you guys know that as well. I work in media, so I feel like I'm acutely aware of it all the time, but we're bombarded every single day on our phones, TVs, whatever. And yet, even despite all that content, it's easy to feel less interconnected with the outside world than ever. I think podcasts can fix that. I really do. And that's for 2 reasons. One is, listening to a podcast, if people do, by the way, maybe a show of hands, who's listened to a podcast in the past week? Okay, I can see through the light. Yeah, okay, that's a lot. Nice. Listening to a podcast is like being a part of a club, right? You feel like you're participating in the media, you're part of it. Traditional media hasn't really treated its audience like this at all. We're just the kind of passive recipients of whatever's on TV, whatever's on the radio. And of course, this means, I think, that we trust the people we're listening to more on a podcast because we feel like they're our friend, they're with us. That trust can be abused, of course. I think we're seeing that a lot, the way that podcasts were used in the US election, for example, a couple of years ago, last year even. And it's gonna happen again, for sure, no doubt about it. But there is an immense power in that if used in the right way. And the second reason why I think podcasts can present a different, a different reality for the media landscape we're looking at right now, is that audio isn't out there, isn't on a screen, it's here, it's in here. When you listen to something, it feels more intimate, right? There's a certain power in pausing and just listening. That's the reason why, events like this are so successful, because it's an opportunity for us all to gather together, share ideas, listen to ideas outside of myself. And you go back through history, that's how stories are always shared, through oral storytelling, through pausing and listening to each other. I suppose this might sound a bit far-fetched, a bit naive, but I think podcasts are a bit like that. They offer something, we've always treasured, the ability to listen to each other. So, as a wrap-up, I want you to take away a couple of things. I know there's a lot of students in the audience. And I want you to think about not only just listening, being a curious listener to podcasts, to whatever media you want, but also becoming a creator yourself, a participator in this new landscape. I recognise the irony of a white bloke coming on stage and saying, podcasts are great, aren't they? But I genuinely mean it because it's new. I'm relatively young, I'm 27. And in the years I've been working in that industry, it feels new, it's exciting, it's fresh. So, if you're thinking even a bit about going into media, I would genuinely say there's a power in going to podcasts, because you have the opportunity to shape that future, to shape a media that can change how we connect to each other at a time where media doesn't feel like it's helping that at all. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.